I think we're all here. So let's go ahead and call our school board meeting to order. We're at a few minutes after 5:30 on the 16th. Catherine and Janice are on the phone with us. Can you hear us both over there?
Yes, I'm
Okay.
assuming that's pretty far away.
Yeah, the phone's
Yeah.
across the room a little bit. So,
Very, not very loud.
okay, well, we'll try to speak up here, but wearing masks and it's just extra challenging, I think.
Yep.
Okay, so,
I forgot about the masks.
right. Okay, so the first item up on the agenda here is citizen input, and we have one submission this month from Mr. Gordon Clay. So I'll go ahead and read his comments here as best that I can. So again, from Mr. Gordon Clay, he writes, August was Overdose Awareness Month. According to the New England Journal of Medicine, accidental drug overdose deaths and suicide have increased at an extreme rate during the early days of this pandemic. Suspected overdoses nationally jumped 18% in March, 28% in April, and 42% in May. Data from ambulance teams, hospitals, and the police. Statistics show that the profile many Americans envision when conjuring up images of a typical overdose victim is far from accurate. These deaths are not limited to backyard alleys and poor neighborhoods. According to a 2014 study, drug users most at risk of overdose are white, middle-aged suburban men. The highest overdose death rate in 2015 represented people between the ages of 45 and 54. The good news is overdoses are 100% preventable. Get help if you need it, and don't let yourself or someone you love become an overdose or suicide statistic. Sidebar, open AA meetings ASAP. In the meantime, I venture that more people will die from drug overdose while meetings are closed than die from COVID-19. September is Suicide Awareness and Prevention plus Action Month. Suicide is at an all-time high. A 2017 analysis by the CDC broke down categories such as cancer into separate cancers and then listed the 50 leading causes of death. In Oregon, suicide was the leading cause of death in 4 of 7 age groups, covering 15 to 54-year-olds. We also know that suicide in rural Oregon is much higher, and in Curry County leads all 36 counties in per capita suicide. On the 2019 Healthy Teen Survey, 26% of 11th graders self-reported they had seriously considered attempting suicide, and 9% had attempted suicide last year. 90% of the people who die by suicide have demonstrated warning signs, but their friends never picked up on them. Especially during this pandemic, don't be one of those friends. Learn the risk factors and warning signs of what to do so when you're around a friend, neighbor, colleague, or family member who is showing these signs, you can ask them with confidence, are you okay? And let them know that it's okay to say, I'm not okay. That conversation would change their life, and it might change yours too. Together we can change the conversation by countering myths and fear with information and action steps everyone can take. We all have a role to play in suicide prevention, not only during the month of August and September, but all year long. So please join me in this effort, won't you? Okay, that's from Mr. Gordon Clay. So appreciate that submission, and I believe that's the only one we had. So, catch my breath here. Item number 3 on the agenda, the consent agenda. Looking for a motion for approval of the consent agenda.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, thanks, Denise. Any questions or discussion on these items from anybody?
Yeah, Alan, I just had a couple questions, just trying to understand. I noticed that the 2 elementary teachers that, in addition to the Isaiah, these are all listed as temporary teachers. Am I reading that correctly?
Yes, if after the school year starts, they're by definition a temporary contract. And so the process is that the following spring, the person in it has the opportunity to essentially reapply. then we post it, and then it would be a regular position after that. So that's just the clause once the school
Got
year
it.
starts.
Okay, yep, in the past, when I read temporary, it meant the short term. So I appreciate the clarification on that. Okay, that was my only question.
On the same teachers is, are they both like not in Brookings? I mean, it appears that they're long distance.
No, they're both here.
They're both here?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, they're in the building every
The
day.
background looks like they're nowhere around.
One recently moved here.
Okay.
The other one has worked for us for almost 6 years as an IA, so she's
Okay.
local.
Okay. Anything else, anyone? Okay, we're gonna go vote for then the approval of the consent agenda. So we'll start on the phone. Catherine?
Aye?
Janice? Are you there, Janice?
I didn't hear you call my name. Aye.
Okay, thank you. Janelle?
I,
Jay?
Aye.
I as well. Okay, pass that. Okay, number 4, district reports and information. First up, an update and comments from our superintendent, Mr. Marshall.
Actually, if you wouldn't mind if we just move to the building reports, and
Okay.
I'll follow up with that.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
I'll put you at the end of this little section, is that okay?
Sure.
Okay,
So
so
go first.
I'll go first, I don't care.
Okay.
She's gonna show you a really pretty slideshow. I don't have anything like that, so. We have kids in the building, which is very exciting.
Yeah.
It's a little strange. We're used to controlled chaos with 700 little bodies, and now we have about 150 of them at a time. So it's just really odd. It's sort of ghost-like. There's a little person here and there, but,
Yeah.
and also the way it's set up is they come, they go to class, and they leave and get back on the bus or get picked up. So it's really good to have them there, but it's certainly not normal. There's some really good things about having 10 kids in a classroom. Teachers are pretty excited about that because it is very calm, it's very quiet. They have a solid 3 hours to do academics. They don't travel anywhere. There's no disruption. And so we're hoping we can make a big difference that way, even if we have them for a shorter time. Some challenges, little people don't always understand that they need to be 6 feet apart. We have to be human, and we are. I had a little friend of mine show up last week for his conference with Grandma and saw me in the hallway and took a straight beeline for me, and I looked at Grandma and went, she goes, "It's okay." So I got my hug. We try to do as little of that as possible, but we have some kiddos who need that. And we're still here, we're still human. We do the best we can. They're great at wearing masks. Very little non-compliance with masks. They show up with one, they wear it. Every once in a while it goes under the nose or under the chin, and it's like, "Hey dude," and they put them back on. So it really is, it's okay, and it's good that they're there. I'm glad we're allowed to have them there. Our 4th and 5th grade teachers that are face-to-face teachers would like to have their kids back too.
Yeah.
So as soon as we're allowed to do that, that will be good.
Yeah, and I understand this last week kind of pushed us up another week, right?
Yeah,
To
it did.
meet the state number.
Yeah. And so depending on all the other things that are happening in the state with the fires and movement and maybe not as much testing, or, you know, who knows, maybe we can get lucky. We're
There are
hoping.
3 weeks in.
Yep, we're hoping. David had mentioned that you guys kind of wanted to know how many kids we had and where they are and what they're doing. Our current enrollment is at about 608, so it's about 90 kids less than not last in the spring. Half of those kids are missing kindergartners.
The
So
90, that means.
we have about 70 kindergartners instead of 110. So we have to think about, if they're all gonna show up to go to kindergarten next year, we might have a very large class.
Yeah.
Because there are people making the decision that they're just gonna keep them home for a year and then come. So that's a big chunk. We have about.
Helena?
Yes,
Just for clarification, so we have a chunk of kindergartners that we've been in contact with that parents just decided not to enroll in
Yes.
this year, is that what I'm
Yes.
understanding?
yes. That is
Okay,
correct.
wow.
Well, and if it was me, I might have made the same choice. On a
Oh, yeah,
personal level,
yeah.
if my kiddo was gonna go, now might not be the time when I would send them either, so I understand that choice.
Yeah.
Does that mean that there's a room?
But that means that we would have a very large class potentially
Yeah, Terry might have
next fall.
40 to 50 more next year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So, they can't skip kindergarten and just opt for first grade?
not really.
Generally not a good idea.
Typically, that's just not a good idea. We try to encourage kindergarten attendance.
Right.
We have about 190 kids that have chosen to be straight online for as far out as they can see. I think this week has shown that that's a challenge for some families.
Yeah, what are you hearing of that so far, those first 3 or 4 days here?
It's, for some kids are loving it, they're moving ahead, they're working at their own pace, they're liking that model. We have some families that are struggling, calling, saying, okay, I don't think I made the right choice. And we're working with that and having them come back if they so choose. But then the hard part is the 4th and 5th graders, they can't come back if that's not the right piece. So there are some families that really struggle with distance learning. It's hard. And so, we try to be there as much as we can, but the teacher isn't active with all the kids at the whole entire time. That's not good practice. So,
Helen,
yes.
I have a question. When the kids go to school in the morning,
Yes.
what does their afternoon online experience look like?
Well, that's going to be a little bit up to families. As soon as Edgenuity is up and running, which is our online program, the kids will be able to go do social studies, science, and an elective. For the younger kids, that's art. And so they can work on that at home in the afternoon.
They can, or they,
So they're not
We are
going
going to
to
give
be
them the
online
opportunity to.
participation for 3 hours?
We're not gonna require it, because some families just can't do it.
okay.
It's just not, it's a very unfriendly thing if we required it, in my opinion. Should they? It'd be great if they did. And I think as the kids get used to it and they get more independent using the program, I think more of them will pick it up and use it and do it. So, it's incredibly hard on families. Like what you read nationwide is absolutely true. It's tough. And, we've exploded the difference between kids who have support at home and kids who don't. That's my biggest worry. So, there we are. Any other questions?
How's transportation going so far?
It's great, we're transporting about 24 kids. It's
Bus
taxi
ride.
service, just on the really big, long yellow bus.
Just like 1 or 2 at a time sometimes, really.
Yeah, and we have some routes that we need to not run. We're gonna let it go for this week, and Alan's working on the next week. It will look a little different when 4th, 5th, 6th, 12 comes back. We're in a whole different world, but right now it's very minimal busing.
Is this,
Helen, would it be possible for me to come and tour the classrooms? This is Janice.
I don't care, but you guys need to decide if we're gonna open it up.
At the door, maybe, because we're not allowing volunteers at the moment with the guidance. And certainly even for just like administrators, the recommendation is, you visit at the door, you don't go in because then you're part of that contact log once you go in for a couple minutes.
Trying to keep the cohorts as clean as possible in case we have a case of COVID and we have to.
Yeah, you have to have a class or classes isolate or quarantine.
It sounds like the answer, Denise, is maybe, and perhaps you and David could talk about how that might look.
Or I can have a video tour and you can check it
Yeah.
out. I'll send you a little clip of what it looks like.
And we could also arrange for the online instruction of having you drop in on an online lesson
Mhm.
and join a class
Mhm.
that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Could do that in any of them.
Yeah, any grade.
So what you're saying is I could log on and be in the class on my computer?
Yes, for the online classes that's what the administrators are doing for the online instruction is they'll drop in on a lesson, visit with the kids, talk to the teacher, even help with discipline occasionally.
And that's one thing
Okay.
we discussed this morning as an admin team, and something else came up in my building today. We really need to get out some parent-appropriate behavior during online lessons. What's okay, what's not okay,
Yep,
yeah. So,
not
we're
with the
working on
kids,
that.
with the adults.
Interesting, yeah, different set of issues to work on.
Yeah,
Well, and it's like Nicole has had a couple of kids who were perfect in her school, but then they bothered their little siblings and they get in trouble with me.
Oh,
Because they're all home, parents are at work, and it's a little bit of a free-for-all.
yeah, I was gonna say, I just mentioned I stood over both my kids and kind of watched them until they kicked me out of the room there, but, I've kind of witnessed this older kids, middle, high schoolers, but a lot of sleepy kids, a lot of kind of, cameras turned off is kind of what I've seen.
Mhm.
Probably what I've observed, so.
Yeah. I physically went in to give a teacher something yesterday, and she's the first grade online teacher, and she had a small group of first graders on the screen, and I got to say hello to them. It's really fun, and it's, to get that age, they're sometimes a little more compliant than when they're a little bit older, so. Okay, Nicole?
Quick question,
Yeah.
on transportation. Just thinking long-term, but would it be advantageous on any level to essentially invest in like 4 or 5 vans for the routes that only have 1 or 2 kids so that we can actually, we may be able to send an aide, or we don't have to pull a bus driver, and we could dual use those for athletics?
and it's a different license to do that.
Exactly, it's not as strenuous as getting,
But we have.
We have some staff that's type
And we have
20
at least
trained.
a van, don't we?
Mhm.
Because Alan was talking about that he's already gonna do that for some of those, like there's one off way up the
One
river.
person way up.
That's what we talked about when we met today, if you have that one off, yeah, you can send somebody else who may not have the full CDL up there to get them, so you're not sending a big yellow bus up there for one
Yeah.
kid.
yeah, I'm just thinking,
Yeah.
even if one's not enough, I mean,
Right.
if we're, saving on fuel, all of the certifications if necessary. And then we always end up with those couple of kids that can't ride the bus appropriately even when it's normal time.
Right.
And
This
we
is
can,
true.
get those kids taken home.
Well, and I think it's important that we don't drive empty school buses around town.
Well, that's
Kind of I was a little bit like, there was an empty bus in the line dropping kids off the other day, backing up traffic, and I'm like,
We don't need
just
that.
go to the bus barn, don't come back here.
yeah.
So it's just really, I think one thing I've noticed both with bus drivers, custodians, a lot of the support staff is having a hard time just adjusting to the fact that we don't have the same, and not as many kids at the same time, and things are different, and sometimes that's hard.
So, next, kind of a note, but it'll be, I think it's universal for all of us who are doing the online portion, so 4 or 5 for you and the rest for you guys, but as the term begins to progress, and, the potential for attendance is gonna be going down, what's the game plan?
Well, right now, the teachers make contact every day. Like, it is numerous phone calls, emails. There's lots of contact. And if teacher's not successful that day, the next morning, the attendance secretary turns around and calls again and says, did you know your child didn't log on or respond yesterday? So we're trying to be very active with that. And, you know, we have some kids, like right now, I've got 3 families that are camping. Like, they don't have a place to live. One transferred from one campground to another today. It's really hard to be a 5th grader and do online learning when you are in the 10th. And so there really are some limited in-person
Yeah, and I'll
opportunities.
touch on that after the principals with the limited in-person and how, you know, we're considering using that to help in those areas as well as other areas where things just cannot be done remotely.
Because sometimes it's just not possible. You can't ask them to do that. So,
Sure.
yeah. But we're trying to keep the attendance in a good place.
Question or follow-up. So I have a couple friends who, I can't remember if it's 4th or 5th, but they're in that
Mm-hmm.
not in school yet timeframe. And they ironically have the same teacher, so I'm sorry, I can't remember the year, but, irrelevant probably. But they're set for afternoons, so they start their thing at 12:30ish,
Mhm.
I can't remember the time. And with less than 24 hours notice, the teacher changed to 10:30.
I think the teacher addressed that with that person
I
today.
think so, but I don't think it was a good answer. I mean, I'm just saying, you gotta think about working parents, and you can't do that.
Yeah.
So, anyway, there's a reason that you guys signed up for morning or afternoon,
Right.
and you wouldn't expect the parents just to go, you know what, it didn't work out for me today, I put them on at 10:30.
Yeah.
And you weren't on there, so, anyway, there's a whole bunch more outside of school that everybody else is juggling too.
Oh, of
And-
course.
and
Which is why
that's
it's so
not fair
hard.
to the employee or the employer.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So anyway, hopefully that doesn't happen again. I think it has to be set that you can't change.
Yeah.
That's not okay.
Okay. Nicole?
Okay,
Thank you, Lloyd.
yeah, thank you, Helena. So just a couple of things that I would like to share. I put it in our board report. I thought it was really powerful what our teachers went through in the very beginning of the year. It was a pretty deep reflecting exercise through positive discipline. And it was kind of honoring the past and looking at the future and where we're going. And they definitely had some really open conversations about what they will miss, but what they're looking forward to. And so at the very end, we all agreed that our silver lining is that we're moving forward together. So we're focusing on these things, connections. This was the meet and greet mini conference drive-through with our kids, and it was absolutely fantastic. We had a great turnout. Our teachers all did very unique things, even though you can see in those pictures the pretty orange is the nasty sky out there. They were 100% adamant that they wanted to meet their kids. And so our 6th graders, they are the bamboo crew. They have shirts that say Language Arts Police, PE Police, and it's just kind of their thing. Our 7th grade team, they dressed up in all of our our sporting equipment and got playing cards made and kind of honored their years. And then the 8th grade team went out there and did strategies for success. So when you're at home in distance learning, what can you do? They met a bunch of students, made those connections. We actually had a lot of kids transfer in this line because I was at the very end of the line handing out their schedules. And once they got to me and I handed the Brookings Harbor Academy online paperwork to them, they said, wait, what is that? And I said, well, that's what you signed up for. Let me explain it. And so I went over it and they're like, we want those teachers. And I said, oh, then you want to do face-to-face, which is CDL right now. Yes, we do. So right in line, we were just changing kids because they obviously had a connection with the teachers in that little loop and really wanted to be able to have them and have more structure, because that's what our system is set up for, is a little more structure than kids that can be independent and do the online kind of at free will. Our students that are doing face-to-face CDL right now are following their schedule. So our enrollment is currently 327. We have 40 students attending the Brookings Harbor K-12 online. We have 287 students enrolled for face-to-face, which is CDL. We had a 96.7 participation rate. We have 2 families that we have not been able to contact. Their phone number is not working, their email, we can't get a letter to them, so we have our next step on them. We have 7 kids that are enrolled, but they have not logged on as of today. So we have called, we've emailed, we've sent letters. Our next step is to do our admin SRO visit to see where they're at. Granted, we're only in day 3, and sometimes kids move. We've had some of the word on the street from other kids is like, oh yeah, that kid moved, and so we're just trying to get more information. But at this point, it's really kind of seeking out at the home what we can do. So pretty good so far, I would say, for enrollment. And I did our numbers too. Where did I write it?
Yeah.
So our projection from last year was 351, so that's a difference of 24 students. And if I can remember off the top of my head, almost 12 of those students actually moved out of the area. So we didn't lose very many kids to other online schools. And just by the numbers, 40 and 287, our kids wanted to be with our teachers. This is our new reality. This is just some snapshots of our teachers teaching. It's absolutely been fantastic and amazing to see what they have done. There's action shots. I go through and look at what they're doing and their windows. They're talking, they're moving their hands, they're doing a bunch of things. They're creating work environments that are adapting to this new reality for them. So it's been really interesting to watch them. We have one teacher that felt like he really needed a stand-up desk, so he took a bunch of textbooks and put them underneath because sitting all day is, you know, as everyone knows, not the best thing. So they're really learning. They've altered their environments. Most of them have kids on, so there's the grid view and they see all their kids at once. Yesterday, I think, when we had the tech outage, I went into a classroom and our teacher immediately grabbed his cell phone, logged on to his Google Meet, trying to talk the kids through the tech issue that we were having. I logged on my phone while he went over, and we just made it work, and the kids were absolutely fine. They were happy, they were talking to me, telling me what they were doing, so it was really nice. So I think so far we've adapted, which has been really nice. For us, like everyone, it's not perfect, it's not going to be. We're gonna have to continue to reevaluate, reflect, and adjust. But I think one thing that we've really focused on is having grace, not only with ourselves, but with others. And technology is not perfect. However, we're accepting that. Kids need hotspots, we're addressing it. A lot of stuff is unknown. Will kids snooze? Will kids be in their bedroom on it? Will kids turn their camera off? Will kids not show up? Yeah, all that's gonna happen. And we're gonna need to address it as soon as it comes up. We can't predict everything. However, we're addressing and talking as quickly as we can to address things. So we're embracing the unknown. We're learning new tools. We have a new online platform. People have created Bitmojis and virtual classrooms. That's all new technology for some of them. So is it a challenge? Absolutely. But we're also challenging ourselves to embrace that digital world. And then the learning environment's very difficult. It's totally different for them who signed up to have face-to-face and be with kids. And one thing that they shared was that they were gonna miss that a lot, that classroom, that laughter, that joy. But what I've noticed, and I think that if you ask any of them, they're getting that. You see it when they're in their digital world. However, we're holding space and we're having grace because we are adapting to the new learning environment as well. So, I love Jaime Escalante, and so I really appreciated this quote. I tell my students, and I'm telling my teachers this, that you don't enter the future, you create the future. And right now that's exactly what we're doing, and it's hard work. So we're embracing it. I hope you guys are too. Thanks for the support. If there's anything out there that you're hearing and we need to address it, please bring it to us so we can take care of it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought it would be nice for you to have a little snapshot of what reality is for us. So just know they're working hard, very hard out there.
Vicki?
What?
Oh, I don't have any cool slides, guys,
No.
sorry. But it is really nice to actually see you in person.
I'm just super visual too.
I'm gonna go ahead and let you, give you the update on high school. You know, we had a fantastic first day. I think all the anticipation about what that's gonna look like and, being nervous about, you know, how it's going to go, all laid to rest as soon as school started, because kids were logging on, teachers were smiling. I was walking from classroom to classroom. Deanna and I video bombed every single classroom, and got to say hi to the students and visit with the teachers, and it was a very exciting day and went very well. If I sat here and said to you it was perfect, you would know that I wasn't being completely honest. So there are some challenges, the challenges with the tech. Not just the hardware, but with the internet, and then some of the software issues. Our teachers have done a marvelous job with learning about this world of Google Classroom and their Bitmojis, right? And developing their classrooms, and they look marvelous, and they're engaging, and they're excited about it. But you know, they still struggle with this is a new deal. This is not comfortable right now. This is different, and change is hard. And just reminding the teachers that this is almost like student teaching again, right? We felt uncomfortable in the beginning because it was new and it was different, but it gets better. And even from yesterday to today, things have gotten better, and people are feeling more comfortable, and we're moving forward, and it's very positive. As far as numbers go, we're actually up. So we have currently 357 face-to-face kids and 132 kids enrolled in the Brookings Harbor Online Academy, which puts us at 489. And I believe that we were somewhere around 456, 454. So our enrollment is actually up.
Last year, was there any online available to the kids? Was there any comparison between that breakout that you just gave us?
No, we did not have a per se online program. We
Right.
did have community bridges where some
Only
kids,
if you were,
right,
yeah.
decided to go online.
I think that's why you have more students, is because I think before this problem, a whole bunch of people wanted the online option in high school especially. So I think if you have to pick things that come out good out of this ridiculous situation we're in, there's one.
Yeah, and I think we have,
gain kids that otherwise aren't gonna go to school and graduate, so that's awesome.
I think we have some other silver linings. I think that teachers are learning and moving forward with the technology, and increasing their knowledge. I think that we have students participating more than they did before. I think they were ready to come back to school. I think that they were super happy that are having that engagement. So we have some challenges, but we have a lot of really positive and wonderful things going on throughout the building every single day. One thing that I do want to read off of here, because I'm not so involved with CTE, so I wanted to make sure to get it out here, is that this fall, the Oregon Department of Education approved our metals and manufacturing application so that it is now a recognized program of study. So this classification makes the program eligible for Perkins funds and formalizes our partnerships with Southwestern Oregon Community College and South Coast Lumber. So we've got some really wonderful things going on with CTE as well.
I was gonna ask how you do CTE type classes under COVID.
I'll get to that.
So
Okay.
he's going to, when he talks about the
Because I
limited
think
in
it's
person,
important, but I don't
yeah.
know.
Don't know how to do it, yeah.
So there are some really cool things virtually that they can do, and then that will be moving into the limited in-person that he's going to address. Jay, I wanted to address the attendance piece at the high school that you asked, and so currently, right now, I have 4 students that I've had no contact with. They haven't picked up their bags, we've reached out, we've had 0 contact with, and so.
So those are 4 that actively enrolled though, at some point, or?
No, they have not necessarily, gone in and done that. So, I was gonna do home visits next week, I'm gonna have to push that off another week. But we will continue to try to reach out to them. I have about
5 students right now. So yesterday I emailed all teachers, said, send me the names of the students you've had 0 contact with. And so we ended up cleaning up that list, and I think we're sitting at about 5 right now that I still haven't gotten a hold of, but we're working on. So they've enrolled, we've had contact, they're just not necessarily engaging with certain teachers, but they are engaging in other ways. So, so we are working on that daily, and we'll continue to. And then not next week, but the week after, I will go out and do home visits again. I did that before for kids that we hadn't reached for enrollment. I went out and did home visits and reached out to those families and had a good result from that. So I was super excited about it.
A question that maybe when Cole's talking, I almost asked, but maybe it's related here, but of those that maybe have no engagement, is internet access a problem? I guess my bigger question is how many just don't have access to connect?
So we have, right now, we have about 30 hotspots out for kids. So we've resolved that problems for kids that we're in contact with. So I can't answer that with those 4. But I will find out the answer, because I will not stop until I find out where those families are at and what they need to help them be successful. So,
I'd say our 7 all have access. They picked up Chromebooks, they picked up their schedules. We had email communication with the families, and then they just went silent. So that's why we're gonna do home visits as well, to figure out what's going on if they're having technical difficulties. We've done a lot of calls and step-by-step and walk through. We've had parents come and we've met them in the parking lot and kind of did screenshots so they could see. But yeah, it's just, historically though, if we look at some of the students, attendance has always been an issue with some of these kiddos. So we're trying to do different things to help. And then in the long run, we're still gonna follow our typical attendance plans. So calling home, meetings, parents have been really responsive to the different kinds of meetings we've had in the virtual world. We've actually had a better attendance of like IEP meetings of families, which has been really nice as well, because you can be flexible with the time.
Another potential gain maybe down the road, you could do those sorts of things virtually maybe.
Yeah.
yeah. So, any other questions that I can answer? I think in the situation we're in, I think it's going really, really well. So I'm super happy.
Good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just comment on your guys' reports. I mean, great job. And everybody understands, like, it's extremely difficult, and everybody's trying to do what they can to make it what it will be. Some of the challenges, like I think Nicole mentioned, we've yet to see. I mean, now it's not just the kids' schedule, but it's the parents' schedule. It's the whatever. There's so many variables at this point that it's not even feasible to wrap your head around them all. So I commend you guys for doing what you can while you have with what you got, and making the most of it for those kids and the teachers, and keeping as much engagement as possible, because I think that just personally, I think that's going to be the biggest hurdle we have, is long-term engagement and keeping these kids continuing to log on and show the self-discipline. And
Yeah, once the excitement of the new school year wears off, then keep them there. Right?
yeah, that's what I watched it last year, at the end of the year.
Oh, it goes,
Yeah.
Well, and I think one of the big things I learned from a training that we did do about the distance playbook was really, we put it into perspective. Last spring, it was crisis. It was crisis learning, crisis teaching. It was not distance learning, it was not distance teaching. And the researchers in education are really labeling it that now. And now that we have tools to really, really embrace distance learning, we can reflect on like, whoa, what happened last spring was crisis. Now we have tools, we have technology, our parents know, we set them up really easily to access things. So I'm hoping that we can keep them engaged. Luckily through Corwin, it was a professional development we did, there are tools, right? They say good teaching is good teaching, and it can happen in any environment. So luckily we have solid people that really want to embrace that, and even though we're virtual, we can make it that way. So it's gonna take us though, keeping the momentum and making sure we're reaching all kids all the time.
And then we're gonna have some kids that we hopefully can bring in
Mm-hmm.
under a limited basis, so that the ones who really struggle with connectivity and engagement when they're
Right.
not in front of a human, that we can do some of those things to help
Yeah, I
with
mean,
that.
we're gonna probably learn more about the different learning styles
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
than ever. I mean, because we're providing one. So it's gonna really, really be effective for a certain amount of kids, you know, but the ones who need to touch, taste, feel, are not going to get that aspect. So it's, you know, and it's not like there's an answer, you know, it's hard. It's hard.
And I
So-
think too, that we've had so many things happen, not just COVID, not just distance learning, now there's fires, like, people's buckets are really full, and it's really easy to tip someone over, even if it's not a major thing that happens, and having, like Nicole said, everyone having grace with each other is really important.
Yeah.
So, just understanding that people are
Oh,
sometimes.
the anxiety's at an all-time high.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And it doesn't take much to, tip, like you said, tip the scale, so.
And I would just like to publicly say thank you to our community out there, because seriously, all the feedback we've gotten from parents and the drive-through, they just appreciate and are so thankful. We had a lovely grandma say she lives 2 blocks away. If we ever need coffee or chocolate, call her and she will bring it, because she cannot believe what everyone is doing. So just thank you to our community for being so supportive, because people are really working hard. We joked, we haven't left. Administrators have been here all summer long. We haven't left. It's been the only thing that we have thought about to make a really good educational experience for our kids. So thank you, community, for being supportive.
Absolutely, yeah, and rely on that for sure, going forward.
And Nicole, I just want to add that your words about you haven't left, I think that you guys have risen above and beyond anything I could and our board could ever ask for in an administration. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that. We know and understand the amount of work that you guys have gone through. And I also want to acknowledge, I just feel how hard it is as I read each of those reports, even from the other departments. And I'm in awe. I already knew that we had a phenomenal staff and administrators, but I am simply in awe of what the work you guys are doing. Thank you.
Indeed.
Thank you. Our hearts are in it. I have this saying, once a Bruin, always a Bruin, and I've only been here for 7 years, but I will always be a Bruin. I mean, our hearts are really in it, so thank you. I think we're done. We're done.
Have fun,
Okay.
guys.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time. Let's kind of go ahead and skip, or not skip through, but go through these other items here, and then we'll leave your comments all in one shot there, if that's okay.
Sure.
Talk about limited in person and all those things. So on the finance reports, any questions or comments on that from the board?
We're gonna have a lot of finance questions. I mean, I counted 114
Yeah.
now,
Mhm.
just from the reports.
Yeah, I mean, for me, going into the enrollment summary and recognizing that, numbers reported to the state, we have significantly lower numbers this year, and then we anticipate a huge uptick next year, but the funding is not necessarily accounted for. I think that's something that we're gonna really need to pay close attention to.
Yes, and there are mechanisms to adjust it, but it is kind of a little bit of an art in terms of saying, okay, we're anticipating this many more, this many fewer kids for the following year. unfortunately, like after, you know, like let's say we estimate low because of our enrollment this year, but we get a big bump in kindergarten, it can in short order be addressed so that that gets bumped up and impacts that year's funding.
Yeah,
Just in
So-
terms of getting staff on board. is that what-
Well,
that's a big
in
concern.
terms of, yeah, but it is a big question, and that was one of the things. So right now, we are at, district-wide, it's 1,420. And our planned enrollment that we're budgeted on is 1,517. So, that's, you know, that's nearly 100 kids less. Now, at this moment, is it critical? No, because there are, I mean, we expected some variability coming into it. We're hopeful that we'll recapture, you know, once we're going and we have some momentum, and especially, you know, once the other grades are able to come back in person, hopefully that will pick up. I think it's more gonna be a question, you know, middle of the year after the holidays of saying, if we're still looking at that, it's, do we consider measures this year to help offset the potential?
I think maybe that's where you're going on, that's my
next year.
question too, is there sort of drop dead time, like, you know, if in January, our enrollment is at a certain level, do we need to?
Well, there's
consider some
no
moves this
specific
year?
drop dead time, it's just more, you know, okay, this is, we haven't seen any variability in the number, let's say, in the worst cases, it stayed there.
Straight down, yeah.
Then we've got a pretty good idea of what we'd be looking at in terms of a difference for next year. And obviously, a number that big, you know, I mean, that's about probably an $800,000 range less that we would get if that's our end number. And again, it's your average membership, so this is just our enrollment snapshot as of today. So it's gonna be something that we're gonna be watching pretty much daily and weekly to see if there is any difference in trend, if it does start ticking up. And so it will be the conversation of, are we going to choose to say, consider things such as potential furlough days, those sorts of things to help offset the impact next year? Or if it's bumping up and down, then we could say, okay, we're just gonna, based on these numbers, we know we're gonna need to make cuts in the following year's budget. So those are, you know, hopefully we won't have to have those, you know, that the numbers will come up a little bit, but that is certainly a possibility. And that's what I've been transparent with the association as well, in terms of our discussions of saying, it's an unknown right now. And that if it continues, then we want to have some conversations about, you know, being proactive about it rather than waiting and having to absorb it all, you know, at once, basically.
It's, I mean, that all sounds good, but it also sounds like the polished answer, I'm sorry. Because I'm really thinking already you need an option A, B, and C. Like, we should be working on an alternative of a budget that looks very different than our current budget. If we wait till January even to start that, I mean,
Well,
the
it's,
business manager's gonna have their hands full already.
you know,
But there's no way in my mind that I don't think it's gonna look different next year.
Even from a state side, right, we don't know how the state's
Right.
gonna
we don't know about the next plan.
Even if our kids, if 200 kids come back.
So I mean, maybe that we don't know exactly what it's gonna look like, but we know we're gonna have a lot less money next year. There's no way we're not gonna have a lot less money. So we need to figure out how we balance a budget with a lot, just picking a number, saying I'm gonna have $1 million less, what am I gonna do with $1 million less? What does that look like?
Right.
We already know, at least, I remember last year when we were in negotiations, when we finished the negotiations and we talked about, the student-teacher ratios. Ours is, super
student friendly.
High on the
student-friendly,
teachers.
right. And so we need to be proactive in talking to the association about that now. I mean, I wanna keep good teachers and good, non-certified, whatever that's called, classified. I mean, we want good employees, but we also don't want to overstaff and then spend all this time and money recruiting and then letting go of people. So I just feel like having,
I agree, and that's sort of the work that we'll be doing, I mean, because there's no other way to make a
Yeah.
cut like that other than FTE. And that was already
Because
done last year, as well, a significant amount of reduction. Now fortunately, nearly all of it was done with attrition. So
Right.
there's no actual formal layoff, and so you'll have some of that, you'll have folks choose.
it didn't seem like there were any hard decisions in my mind. Like, it's hard. I've been in the middle of things where I've laid off police officers, super difficult thing
Right.
to do. And one of the hardest and worst, and we did it by attrition, we did it by we never went and go, well, that classroom only has a 10-to-1 student-teacher ratio. Like, we need to look at I don't know, I don't even know the subject
Well, I'm
of
sure-
social studies versus English
I'm
versus.
sure we have a RIF policy on
We do, but, and it's much deeper than that. I mean,
Yeah.
RIF is essentially,
Maybe
for
we
the
don't
most part, is
see that.
seniority.
it. Right.
But that we do need to look at in terms of how we're gonna maintain programs if we need to cut and
Right.
have those conversations. And so, you know, right now, honestly, the focus is just getting things going.
Mhm.
And it's been a tremendous lift and staff have really risen to the challenge. And so, you know, my intent is I'm communicating that there's concern so that, you know, as folks are saying, oh, well, we could just spend more money on this, it's like, no, we really shouldn't spend more money on this. And also how we approach things like the Student Success Act, the Student Investment Dollars, which we will still be getting. But that being mindful of, okay, this year, it's probably not a good idea to spend that on staff because of the unknowns and potential cuts there. But that there's also the likelihood the following year that, I mean, that those dollars seem as secure as they can be, so that there's a likelihood of that continuing just because of what the revenue source is.
I mean, just this week, the state legislature snagged money that was a PERS match for putting
Right.
funds in unlimited, unfunded
Yeah.
liability. They just snagged, I mean, so all those jurisdictions that actually went after that refinancing so that they got this free match money just disappeared. And I picture the state, I mean, the fire's on top of,
Right, and
It's
so
just gonna
those
keep
are
adding.
some unknowns as well.
Right, that's kind of my comment, is what is, you know, next funding cycle, in my mind, which is totally unknown.
It is.
anyway,
I don't see
Good
us
luck with that.
getting any increase in budget.
No,
And so that's gonna be, you know, an issue. And then, you know, the other thing is, on the flip side, if all of a sudden we do get 40 more kindergarten, and it happens to be one of the larger classes, because it usually goes like, I think, like 3-year cycles, like, right, we'll have a big class every 3 years or
Have a
something
bubble
like that.
class,
So
yeah.
it's weird. But let's say it falls on one of those, and all of a sudden we have a ballooned class that's much larger than everybody else, and it's gonna move through each grade as a balloon, and we're gonna have to adjust.
yeah, but that's, I mean, that's not an uncommon practice.
Okay.
You're saying, okay, this year, you're no longer a second grade teacher, guess what, you're a first grade
Third
teacher.
grade teacher, yeah.
Because we have that bubble.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's not optimal, but I would much rather have a bubble and needing to be shuffle folks around than the other of seeing, okay, how can we do this with less?
Sure.
And you may, you know, maybe even an extreme case, which we experienced occasionally in Hermiston, because it was a slow growth, but at the same time, it's like, okay, a lot more kindergartners showed up than we thought, and we were, you know, this time of year, you're hosting, hiring, and adding an FTE just because you didn't have enough to accommodate the number of kids, and the rest of the classes were full. Now, we might be in a position to, you know, reallocate some of the classes, and there's a lot of creative solutions. I mean, even with like, I think, I want to say one of the online classes at least is a 4-5 mix. I mean, so there's a lot of ways that we can still maintain as good of, you know, student-teacher ratio, and especially if you've got, you know, big class here and small class there. But I agree, if we're looking at a cut that big, that we need to be getting into the weeds sooner than later. And what's our plan, what's our approach, how many FTE is that? Because really, with the rest of the materials and items is, I mean, you can put off the textbook adoption, those sorts of things, but in order to save that kind of money, it's staff. I mean, just with what is, I think, 85% of our budget is staffing cost. And so, you know, again, my goal was, for the start of the year, is like, I don't want people freaking out about, they're already concerned about being laid off. The bus drivers are very concerned about that and saying, you know, I can't promise that that won't happen, but right now, we're focused on getting going, we're focused on, we need the bodies, we need that just to be able to get started, where, no, we're light on riders right now, there's plenty of work to go around, and there's still a lot of figuring out just the logistics that we're things, no matter how much we plan, unexpected things happen.
No, but good point, I mean, it's well taken in my mind too, but I'm happy.
I don't know if that was a compliment or not, but you know, said that was a polished answer. It's like,
I'm sorry, maybe pause wasn't a good word. Just,
But prepare.
it's the answer that we all want to hear, but I.
no, there's gonna be
Let's
some
be
potential
prepared.
for some really difficult work. And, you know, I'm thankful that we didn't, that there wasn't a critical need to do that prior to the start of this year. Because earlier in the spring, we were looking at significant cuts for this year before, you know, all of the special sessions and everything like that. And so that was the concern of like, oh my gosh, we're gonna have to lay off in the middle of all this. And so fortunately, we didn't have to do that. But yeah, our enrollment is down. And we're not the only ones impacted in that way.
Mhm.
I mean, we've had the long-term kind of gentle trend and made a big step last year in terms of recalibrating to get to a sustainable staffing level. But if our kid numbers stay lower, that number changes in terms of what's a sustainable staffing level.
It's hard being reliant on other governmental entities, i.e. the state, maybe federal, but, because and the school has so much that comes from the state. My life is easy in comparison because cities get very little money from.
Yeah, I guess you have your
State
tax
entities, so it
district
makes-
and that's about it.
Yeah, it's cigarette tax, liquor tax, but they're really small, and I'm surprised that the legislature hasn't done something with the student success money yet. And, I mean, you look at all the businesses that are hurting, and that extra tax that they add on businesses, that those businesses were already ticked off when they got that first bill.
Mhm.
That was before all this happened. And, the politicians are gonna be looking at giving relief to business, and how are they gonna do that? I mean, to me, it seems like a reality that they're gonna do something with that.
I mean, that's certainly a possibility, but as of
And I'm not
now-
trying to guess, I just feel like again, not trying to guess the exact things that are gonna happen, but I feel like looking at alternatives that maybe aren't what we prefer, but
Right.
that it maybe the likely or could happen.
Which is why, right, and that's, so specifically with the student investment is, we don't want to spend any of the
On
money
people,
this
and
year
that's
on
really good.
recurring expenses.
Yeah.
And there was plenty of expenditures in there of things that we need to do, like
That are
the ADA
non-recurring.
bathrooms, that, okay, you know, we're gonna take care of those first, those are one time and you're done, so you don't have an annual cost. And then the next biennium will have, you know, okay, does it go away, does it increase, is it stable? And then consider, do we wanna put staff on that as we have
And
funding?
how were those conversations with the association, or just employees in general? Was that pretty well accepted? And
In terms
as
of-
far as spending on capital versus people?
It's just been very initial conversations. Most of this has not been on folks' radar. And I'm trying to, when the opportunity presents itself, well, it's just,
Sorry.
are we able to start school? And that
Right.
really, it has been such a tremendous effort, and I really want to echo, you know, what the principal said of, you know, our staff has really risen to the challenge. Has it been perfect? No. But it's pretty remarkable as you go around and like the principals do. I've been, you know, poking my head in the windows, and, you know, you can see the kids on the screen, and the kids are engaged, the staff's engaged, and they're like, even if they don't love it, they're owning it. And some of the staff have really struggled with the transition of, you know, I've been, you know, maybe not embracing, you know, computer technology in my instruction for a long time, and now that really can no longer be the case. And so some of those staff are struggling, but the rest of the staff, I mean, they're saying, okay, you know, let me help you with this. And so there have been tears, but that really, as a group, they're stepping up together and saying, we need to make this work. And so really, that's been the focus of the energy. My goal, and especially as I'm meeting with the different groups and meeting with the executive council, is to put that out there, of just saying, we're focusing on this, but part of the reason why I can't say, you know, we'll hold you 100% for the year, which some districts, smaller districts, they committed in the MOU saying, we'll have no change for this year. It's like, there's so many unknowns that we can't commit to that. And I've been very transparent about that, and saying, we hope to avoid it, but that if this trend continues, we're gonna, you know, it's gonna make sense to try and deal proactively with the impact, as opposed to just saying, we're gonna absorb a huge chunk in the next year's budget.
Which in the long run is worse for everybody, so it's definitely better to,
Right.
you know, attack it
Right.
when you know. I'm excited to hear how you're gonna do in-person small groups, so.
Oh, so you want?
We're gonna hear that in just a second.
Okay.
Just quickly, just to be official here, so we need specific questions on enrollment summary.
Sorry.
We've touched on it a lot, and you probably will again in your comments, but this is a matter of agenda here. Specific questions on enrollment summary that we have in front of us, that we haven't talked about.
Yeah, I think we're good. Are they still good?
Yeah, Catherine Denise, you still with us? Check in.
Yes,
I am.
It's like the kids in school.
I know, making sure you weren't
Make
asleep.
sure you're with us. Okay, let's circle back then
I
to,
asked my question in the beginning.
all right. Let's go ahead and go back to the top of number 4 here and get the comments in official from Mr. Marshall.
All right, thank you. So I'll start with the limited in person. So I'm trying to make sure it's technically accurate. So we have, so 4th grade and above, actually K-12 has, we have a plan for the hybrid model, which in our district is half the day, we split the day. That was our driving focus was, we wanted the kids in front of us as much as possible. We wanted to do everything we could to maximize it. Other districts did rotating days. We felt every day was going to be more beneficial. So under the state, so we have that set up, and there's a set of metrics, and that's the one that includes the state metric of the 5% positivity and the county 5% positivity or below, and 10 or fewer cases. So across the system, K-12, if you hit those for 3 weeks in a row, you can move to your hybrid model. And then the state has, on top of that, said, okay, we have a couple of situations where there's exemptions. And so one of the situations is with K-3. And so what's the state's communicated, ODE's communicated is, it's a combination of, those kids are least likely to benefit from distance learning and struggle the most with it. And then based on the kind of the known research and evidence of saying students under 8 years old are least likely to be impacted as well as to transmit the disease. So the risk level is lower having those kids in class. So with those considerations, the state had said, okay, if you meet a different set of criteria, you can have K-3 in person. And so that is, it's just the fewer than 30 per 100,000, and I think and the 5% positivity, and this one was a little
I
sneaker.
thought the state metric didn't.
No, county, just the county 5%.
Just the county.
So state is not a part of the exemption, but it's the 2 county, and then you can't have a case within student or staff within the last 2 weeks. And so that wasn't clear at the beginning of the summer, but the state ODE clarified that. So we sent our student and staff list to the health department.
So is this, again, is this any staff? Is this a teacher at the high school? Like
Technically, well, no. So it was, but it's any staff at the elementary,
At the
not just K-3, but any elementary teacher. And so we sent them the elementary staff list and the student list. So they said, nope, you're clean. And so that we met that part as well as the other 2 metrics. So that's what enabled us to do K-3 in person and continues to. And then the other exemption that as the summers progressed, they've clarified quite a lot. It's called limited in person. And so it's the same criteria, the 30 or below, the 5% county, and the no cases in your, they call it local community, but it means in the district. And so with that though, of course, it's a whole different set of restrictions basically. So you're required to have smaller cohorts. And I need that they just released something, I think yesterday, so I need to double check to see if there's been changes. But the most recent prior version said 10 is your largest cohort of kids together, and that's also on the bus, so you can only transport 10 kids together. Because it's saying you haven't met the metrics to do your hybrid, but that we recognize that there's some students who have additional needs and or there's things that just cannot be done online.
your welding class.
Right, yeah, exactly. And CTE was one of the early examples of the intent there is no, there's no way to demonstrate a weld other than coming in and demonstrating a weld. And so the intent there is that's not the welding class, it's just that specific thing that can be done otherwise. So you can bring kids in under that and schedule that so that they can come in and demonstrate it so then they can progress. It's a pretty long list, and I can send that to you in terms of what are allowable things. So we can also do it for special ed services, if it can't really otherwise be done. Now, the caveat there, and actually with any of them, is we can't require that. It's an option. So we say, hey, we can send the bus out, we can bring you in, but if, let's say, there's a parent that has a special needs child, and they said, my kid's not going to come to school at all. So we can't say, well, that's the only way you can receive SPED services is through if we bring you in. So we're still obligated to figure out another option if they don't want to come in, but we are able to bring them in. And the parents said, we've started to reach out, and actually parents have said, is there anything, you know, that you can do? We said, yes, we're going to be rolling that out. And so, yeah, I mean, and you can even just bring kids together for like connecting as a group, because if kids aren't, you know, just those, it's just about anything, but the question is this something that you really can't successfully do online?
And when they come in that group, that same group, let's say it's welding, and once a week there's a hands-on procedure that they demonstrate
Right.
in the classroom. So do they always come in with the same other 9 people? Is that?
It can change through the week, but within a week, I mean, it can't be the cumulative, so you could have 2, I mean,
Right.
there's all sorts of different variations. There's restrictions on, the kids can only be in the building for a maximum of 2 hours. And you can only have like a maximum of, over the week, a maximum of 250 kids in the building. So it's intended, well, they put caps on it so that it's not like, okay, this is our back door to just be able to have the kids back there. And that it's truly for, we've identified these needs, there's kids with extra needs, or there's instructional needs that can't be addressed otherwise, we're gonna offer that option. So it's a lot more tracking and record keeping for us, because you've got to track all the cohorts and be able to capture that. Our teachers are teaching full-time, so it's finding the time to do that. Now, obviously with CTE, it's like, that's just gonna be my instructional time. Potentially with SPED, that would just be instructional time. So we actually met this morning, and so we're at the initial planning phases. We wanted to get school going first. And now we're saying, okay, what's our priority list? How are we going to address this? And then also working with Alan in transportation of saying, what's our capacity to go and get those kids? Because we really want to be mindful that we don't say, okay, you know, if you can come in, you can access it, but Jay, you can't come in, so sorry. It's like, no, it's got to be, if we're going to offer it, it's available to everyone, so that if Jay can't come in, we'll send a bus to get him, so that he has the ability to access it.
You know where he lives, that's not gonna be easy to get a bus to it.
Yeah, I know.
You gotta plan that in.
Right, yeah, and so that's our, so we'll be working through this week, and the start of next week, kind of identifying the priorities. And then, I mean, some of the kids have already surfaced, but, you know, like the principal suggested of, we know we're gonna reach out to these families, and we know where they live, so then the next step is start, okay, what's it gonna look like for a bus route?
But in order to offer welding, and you have a known student that lives way up in the woods, before you can even offer to anybody, you have to figure out how to get the logistics to that far away student.
Then we want, I mean, that should be a part of it, and, yeah, I mean, like I said, then maybe that's sending the van up, and do we have the time to do that, how can we do that? Now, it might not be that student gets, you know, the same exact number as the rest of the kids because of that, but we can't have that be an exclusionary factor, that they just don't have the ability to get themselves in, or their parents don't. So there's that logistical challenge there. So, but currently, with just K-3, we do have capacity, excess transportation capacity. So I think while we're in this mode, we'll be able to do a fair amount, and then it's just figuring out the times of when. And for example, like K-School, because they've hit the capacity with their K-3, any 4 or 5 kids we bring in will have to come to here or the high school, because they can't physically be in the building, because we already have our cap of kids in the building there. So this is our stopgap, and before we're in with our hybrid mode. So let's hopefully, if the stars align, and by the start of second quarter, we're K-12, then that piece pretty much goes away, because the kids are coming every day.
Is the delay on the 4th, 5th, was that the state metrics or the county metrics?
This week it was both. We met the positivity, but the other two, so we were over the 30 or 10 per 100,000, and the state bumped up significantly.
Yeah.
If I recall, this last reported week, the state was like 5.6%.
Yeah, and that was trending nicely down, and it
Right.
bumped below, it was a
County was
couple
at-
weeks below 5, and then it bumped back up to 5.6, so.
The county metrics have been higher than our ratio for the 2
And it
weeks.
really doesn't take much for our county.
No, it's 3. 3 puts us over. So, you know, we had some talks earlier in the summer about, you know, how to strategize that. And I think Jay brought up, is like, do you want to strike when you can? And I think that's our intent. So as soon as we can do 4 or 5, we're going to jump on that. even though it's gonna be this potential waiting game. But that's also why we chose to start it on a Friday. One, if there's hiccups, we've got the weekend to work through it. But two, if the data get released on Monday, we can notify folks and so that you've got that week buffer, where you know for sure whether we're gonna be able to do that or not.
And if we get that, and we get to 4-5, does that open the door to do 6 through 12
Yes.
when we choose?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes, that was, and although I asked that question directly to ODE, never got an answer, so, but I did shop the idea around with different superintendents in the state, and they said, no, we agree with that interpretation of, once we're anything above three, we're operational for four
Whatever,
through
we're
12.
just choosing to be online for,
We're just choosing to do it for consistency to finish out the quarter. So yeah, if on the 9th, I think it is now, if we have 3 good weeks and we're able to bring 4-5 in, then unless it's a major, major jump, you know, like above 30 per 100,000, we'll be able to do 6 through 12 as planned.
Is it like the first week in November or something?
Yeah, it's, I think the 6th, so it's the start of that quarter. So, yeah, so that's gonna be the thing, and then obviously as, if 4 or 5 keeps getting bumped out, we've got about 3 or 4 more weeks before they line up. Where we need those same 3 weeks for 4-5 and 6-12.
and then we'll be having a discussion on whether we put it up for another quarter.
Yeah, I mean, I would lean towards with 4 or 5 is the moment we can, we do it.
Sure.
Because then that gives us that flexibility to say, you know, because I've had a couple of high school teachers saying, you know, once you get into November, you've got the holidays, you've got all these things that can potentially scramble it. And so there was, they were pitching the idea of, well, let's just wait till the semester. And I said, well, we're not there yet. So I think that the decision to wait till the start of the quarter will allow us to have, you know, we're having a stronger start, the energy's focused on their 6-12. And the other thing that both the middle school and high school have done, and same with the elementary, is the kids who aren't the full academy, they're on their same schedule that they'll be on in person. So any transitions back and forth will be compared, that they already know their schedule, they already will know their teachers. The only difference is they're coming into the classroom, but the schedule will stay the same, you know, the work is gonna be very similar. So any needed transitions, for example, if we have an exposure, we need to quarantine a grade or something like that, will be that was part of our planning process, is that has to be as minimal interruption as possible. I mean, it's gonna be an impact, but it'll be a lot smoother than like having to shut down last spring of, the kids already know the drill, they're already doing the work so that if, let's say, November, we have to shut down a grade for a couple of weeks, that won't be a huge impact on the learning and the progression. So any other questions about limited in person? So I'm hoping by, we might start very lightly later next week, and then the week after look at in terms of the transportation piece. We've already had some discussions about, okay, let's start doing this, you know, and we can do that sooner than later. And then, so the week after is the goal in terms of being able to do that and figure out what our capacity is with bringing kids in for limited in person. Athletics and activities. So I met with most of the coaches yesterday. Just kind of revisited with them in terms of our plan for coach stipends, which I think I sent out an email, but it's we've identified this season, or our season 1 OSAA is pretty open-ended. So we said, in order to keep your coaching contracts whole and to give kids opportunities, you have a designated window of time. You pick 2 weeks, and those will be essentially your paid 2 weeks. They can do more, and then they can also do club sports outside of those 2 weeks as well. So, and then the regular OSA seasons, as they propose, it starts like in January, and then you have slightly compressed seasons there. And so if the coach is able to complete the season, it doesn't get shut down, then they get the remaining 70% after that. So we had some discussions about, and we're working through the process of some local contests, which are allowable under the rules. So we're sort of, okay, which coaches are interested in it, and then we're reaching out to other districts to see, and there is some interest in the region. Some districts are saying we're not there, other districts are saying, yeah, we can consider it. And so we're, if we can, and we can get some takers, we hope to do that, you know, following the OSA and the ODE guidelines. One of the questions that came up was, well, what about having a team come up from Crescent City? And so it's like, okay, good question, we're gonna need follow-up on that. Because right now it says, you know, it's, the intent is doesn't have to be in your league, but other high school athletes. So we can't compete against a club team as an OSAA team under those current rules. So we are working on that, and we'll see if we have the ability to figure out any contests. Like football, for example, they can do flag football. They can't do any contact, those sorts of things. Indoor sports are still going to be a challenge. So we talked to volleyball, we're seeing if we can identify some standards and look at an outdoor setup at least to give them the ability to do that. We might have some old ones that we can just kind of cobble together, you know, stick in the ground and make it work for that. So the goal is if we can figure it out, if we can make it work, we want to provide the opportunity. Quick note that the last SUPS meeting, they shared that the state board, a big thing that they'll be taking action on is likely action, or they might have done it today, I think they might have been today, prohibition on symbols of hate. And so we have a follow meeting on Friday to go, okay, what does that mean? But like, for example, they would prohibit like Confederate flags in schools, those sorts of things. So they'll be defined, and we'll have some training on that. So I just wanted to give you the heads up that that was going to be coming down the pike, and as we have more specific on what that is, I will share that. They will also, I believe, or have voted on temporary adjustments to Division 22 to kind of loosen it, compress it, or, you know, make it so that we can actually meet the requirements. And we will be starting that process in the very near future in terms of going through that compliance. But in general, based on like with the instructional time, I think we'll be compliant with the new temporary requirements. So let's see. So last month we talked a little bit about, we had some and I apologize for this, some cross signals on the new athletic code of conduct. And at first I thought it was contradicting policy, but it's not. It's actually contradicting administrative rule in terms of the updated policy. So the policy, the umbrella policy is student conduct. So that's a pretty general policy. It's JFC, and it says you need to have these things in place, but it doesn't speak to any details of, you know, what has to be in it and what your athletic code of conduct needs to be. So I reviewed the previous AR, and so the update, which I will have, it actually matches what's in the athletic code of conduct. And so the clarification there is, and I'll have copies of both of this for you, and we'll put it in the next agenda just for your reference. So I apologize, it kind of slipped through the cracks and it wasn't included in here because it was some last minute work. So the process that the high school used is they had a pretty large stakeholder group went through a complete revision of the athletic code of conduct. And they also posted it for several weeks for comment. And the intent, the specific difference with the previous administrative rule is around student drug testing and consequences for positive tests. And so, and as Jay pointed out earlier, part of the intent of that group was to make it more easy to administer it and to be able to be consistent and fair with the administration of the consequences. So most of it is just clarification of the consequences in terms of, you know, first offense if the student has a positive drug test, that sort of thing. The other significant difference is it calls out tobacco, which was not in the previous one. So it's a different set of consequences. It's a lighter set of consequences than for drugs or alcohol, but it also calls out tobacco as a violation and has a series of consequences for that. And so, which is exactly in the code of conduct as presented last month. It was in the packet, but we didn't act on it. And so with this AR, it's just been updated to reflect and mirror what's in the athletic code of conduct, so the two line up. And since it's an AR, there was no need to take action on it. And I do want to just note, what we noticed on this agenda is under action items, there's a combination of policy and AR. So on our next one, what we'll do to address that is we'll probably just move the AR like under the My Report. So, because we're required to notify you and
Right.
share the changes.
But we don't need action on it.
But you don't act on an AR, you act on the policy that directs us to make the AR. So we'll get that cleaned up, but I just kind of wanted, we noticed that and was like, okay, that, I don't see any need to change it now, but you're technically just voting on the policy or doing the read on the policy. And so I will send you just the clarification. I hope you didn't confuse the matter more. But those were the changes
On the
AR.
Send out on the athletic code.
Yeah, well, you have the athletic code of conduct. I will resend it to you because it was in the last packet, and then I'll just, the new AR language just reflects that. In the previous one, it was a narrower set of consequences for drug and alcohol, but that's all it called out.
Quick question on that.
Yes, sir.
Something that's come up in the past that's, it's been not really well defined is the difference between on-site and off-site misbehavior. And so, if something happens at an away event or an extracurricular field trip, a lot of times the off-site travel policy has been kind of tossed aside for whatever maybe the athletic policy was. And so it seems like as an ambassador of the
Mhm.
school, if you get caught stealing or smoking outside of the gym, or,
Right.
Whatever,
Should just say consequence.
that
It
it's-
should line up, okay.
Yeah, because you would think it would just kind of, it would go, like, here's the consequences for doing this off-site. But also it's a violation under code of conduct in athletics.
Right.
So
It
completely
should
different.
line up. Right.
Maybe consequences, because being off-site, you might be suspended. Getting caught at Step Park, you might be just reprimanded in practice and whatever the code of conduct says for athletics.
Okay.
So I think there's some clarifying pieces there that haven't really aligned in the past. I know in the past we've had a situation where we had an athletic team who they ended up stealing a bunch of stuff from a hotel.
Mhm.
So that's probably gonna be a little bit different than, stealing a book out of a library or something of that nature.
Something local.
You know what I mean? And it was never ever really clarified for the administrators to actually hold the kids accountable. So just something that,
Yeah, I will follow up on that. I think that is important, because when you said offsite, because it does get into the weeds where, if it's completely unrelated to school, and we learn about it, then there can be some challenges and limitations. But if it's a school event, I agree, it should be, a consistent lens of, okay, you're representing the school, whether you're doing athletics
right,
or whether you're at a chess match in Portland, it's a similar lens. So I will follow up with that and bring that back to you saying, okay, here's where it's aligned, and if there's areas where we need to make it more clear. Because I think the simpler and more clear it can be, it's easier for the kids to understand as
Yeah.
well. And it's less, for the parents to say, oh, well, but in this technicality, this was chess and not football, so the
Well,
kids
that's
shouldn't
what
have that.
happens, is, well, last year somebody did the same thing.
Right.
This year,
And that was, as I understand, that was part of the goal with this is, it just helps us to be more consistent with that, so that, if there should be a consequence, it's a fair and consistent consequence that's, regardless of the student.
Yes.
It's more the conduct that's in
We
question.
can, we can shape culture with consistency.
Yes, I agree.
I think that we had a good start at attempting to do that when we redid the athletic code of conduct.
Mhm.
But to be fair, as you're going through it, it would be interesting as you have to live with it for, the next
Right.
year. I really don't think we all had a chance. So Jay and I were both on the committee. There were some parents, there were some
Mhm.
teachers, coaches. It was put together, gosh, I feel like it was fall last year. We had a couple meetings. I know I was out of town, so I was on the phone, and everybody else, I think, was in this library, or maybe Case School Library, I don't remember. But anyway, and then I feel like the next meeting got canceled, all of a sudden COVID happens. And so the athletic policy got updated and adopted, but the fact that it was posted for weeks, that I think I was the only person that emailed
Right.
Vicki back. So I know it was good intention, she had it on a list and it had to get done, but I don't
Thorough
really
process.
believe we accomplished what we wanted to.
Well,
It wasn't
there's
as
nothing
collaborative.
restricting us from saying,
Right.
this is, I mean, I think with a lot of, especially important things like this, it needs to be a living document. I mean, we need to have something in place that's saying, okay, this is our best effort, and this is a change from previous, but we want to continue to align, we want to continue to clarify, we want to continue to, gather input on that. So I think revisiting that, I do think there's a need to say, here's where it is at this moment, and it's different than what was in place last fall, but then to continue that work, absolutely.
Anyway, so just,
Yeah.
as you look through it, it might seem like we might not have got done what we
Kind of
wanted
all
to.
lined up.
I mean, I think the two things that you mentioned are the most, that we were aiming at that were most important were consistency
Yes.
and accountability. And I think those,
And I think those are some of the more clear parts of this, it lays it out, it gives you, very specific examples, so, if I had to administer this, it's much easier to do, there's much less like, oh, well, should I or shouldn't I, it's like, no, I really have to do this, and so, sorry, you have this consequence, for this action, and then if it happens again, this is the next step in the consequence. Anything else on that? So I'll get you the most current copies and we'll include that just for your reference in the next board packet. And then, yes, continue to work on. And there's a number of, and I would say the same, similar with the suicide prevention plan that was adopted, is that's a good start. That's not where we want to end. And so that's something that we need to revisit, make sure we're doing a good job of what we have, but then look at, okay, what are some things that are missing? Are there things that should be clarified? Are there things that need to be considered that weren't in the first go around? The only other, let's see, so with our work of, planning work in the summer, I will admit we had pretty much tunnel vision with wanting to maximize student time. There's no regrets about that. We would do the same thing again. But one of the byproducts of that is that, and I've already mentioned this before, is we're not compliant with the contract with PLCs. That time there was not the time to do the Wednesday early release if we're looking at already having kids half day. And so I communicated that early on with the union. It's part of our MOU, or potential MOU in terms of saying we need to address it, let's figure out what we can do. So there's not any specific solutions, but one idea that as a rough draft that would help address a number of needs is to consider once a month essentially having, it would be like, if the kids were in person, they'd have distance learning, so the kids wouldn't come in. And if they're distance learning, it would be, the teacher would say, here's your activity for the day, I'm gonna follow up with you the next day, so that can free up that day to allow for both PLCs as well as IEP meetings. We're really struggling to find a time within the workday for those meetings, and so that would make a dent on that. It's not a silver bullet or anything, but that's an idea that we're floating. And then so over next week, we're asking the principals to, okay, does anybody else have other ideas? But there's only so many hours in the day, and we have them very tightly scheduled. So I think we're going to need to consider some sort of variable like that, and what's the balance? You know, the initial scope would, we would really like 2 a month. It's like, no, I think that's probably too much for the community. But if we looked at potentially 1 a month as a day to be able to accomplish those tasks, and then, you know, find the rest of the time during the work week and work day. So this is not a specific proposal. It's just here's an idea, and that I will be bringing you, because that would need to be part of an MOU that we can follow up with the union in terms of, okay, here's how we're going to address PLC times. And then the other thing related to that is conferences. So, you know, right now we have it's the evenings of the 4th and 5th, and it's just essentially two 4-hour blocks of time that have been dedicated in our calendar to conferences. So a conversation we're having, that's not enough time if our priority is to connect with each family, everybody. And so there's a number of different things that we can do, but we could, it would be pretty straightforward to say, keep that time. We might want to look at a different date, and because if we're able to, November 6th would be the first day of in-person class. And so having the teachers just finish 2 12-hour days and then come to the first day of in-person. So we might want to, we could consider, I think it's the following week, like the 9th and the 10th, to do the evenings. And then, because it wouldn't be that same week, and then we would still have the evening conference times. The plan now would be virtual conferences, but absent that, continue with that evening time, and then identify, I think what we talked about was, in order to have the time to have a small conference with every student, we're looking at the need for an additional 2 days. Now, I know that's at the middle school. I need to confirm that with the high school and the elementary school, is do you need that same amount of time? And it would be okay if the elementary was able to do with less time, then we would just have less time allocated for that. But what we could do that's easily allowable under that is just say, this day is a conference day. So your students would not be attending class, but they would be attending conferences with their families. And if like the elementary school, they could, with their K-3, they could bring them in for those scheduled, kind of like they did for the opening week, was it last week? So just trying to think creative of like, okay, while we're in CDO, we have additional conference requirements, and then there's also the desire of saying, I hope that doesn't mess things up, it's important to connect with as many families as possible. And I will have to admit, I was a little, because 1 day for the whole year is pretty light. Yeah. Just in terms of other districts I've been in, they've approached it differently, and some of them, you know, they did full school days and evenings or combinations, but more common what you see is several days in the fall, and then potentially fewer days, especially at the secondary level for spring. I mean, because they experience like, it's not worth our time to dedicate 2 full days for high school. We just don't get the turnout, so they have 1 day. And so, so part of a long-term discussion, but also just a consideration of, you know, do we want to consider making more time within the schedule to allow for that purpose, which counts as instruction time. So we're not changing instruction time, it's just a different use for it, saying we're going to press pause at the end of the quarter and have conferences.
You might get more participation. I think the conferences, I mean, I like the format when they're all in the gym, when you go to your, you line
Yeah.
up behind your classroom.
So yeah, that system will
It's
work.
awesome in the fall because it's right between the quarter.
Right.
And so then you kind of figure out maybe your kids' strengths and weaknesses and what you weren't figuring out, you know, what you were slacking on as a parent. I've always thought it was so odd we do nothing. Like, second semester doesn't matter, I guess. We never check in. Like, so if you're not the parent that emails the teachers.
Yeah.
So maybe it's odd that we do nothing in the spring, and I'm not sure why.
And that's a great long-term discussion of saying, okay, when we build our next year's calendar, do we want to have more, you know, days for conferences, and how do we want to approach it, and what do we want conferences to look like? Because one of the conversations we had this morning was, you know, saying, well, the teachers are really going to want it to be after report card day. And well, report cards don't need to drive it. I mean, if we're, because the change over time is, right, because any teacher should be able to say about any kid, it's like, here's their strengths, here's their challenges, and you you don't need this document or report card, it's just kind of, here's a marker at this moment in time. And so we had those in some of my previous districts. Those were discussions we had with teachers to say, don't let the report card drive it. You know what the kids' needs are, you know their strengths, you know their challenges. And so, the report card is becoming less important, especially with the online grading and everything is. At any moment, you can log on and say, okay, my kid's doing just fine, or I can see that they're struggling. I don't need to wait till that official quarter notification that, junior's not doing as well as I hoped or anything like that.
The real balance would be just the time of it, because it does probably take 2 days or more to see everybody, if that's the intent.
Yeah, I think, so Nicole calculated it out, and they were saying to do short ones, like 15 minutes, was gonna take 24 hours.
To be like in the gym, when you have everybody in there,
Right.
it's 2 full evenings of 4-hour, 5-hour sessions.
And
that's
what's our percentage of how many families do we?
You might get half, I don't know, less than 100% for sure.
A lot. You see the same people every year.
Yeah.
I personally see the value in doing it before the report cards, because a lot of times that's what drives the parents' conversation. And it's more about the grade than it is about the kid. And having the conversations just about the child, I think
Right.
would be
You kind of
genuine,
spread it out
valuable.
over time, now that we have Google Meets and
Yeah,
individually
we've got a
scheduled.
lot of flexibility in terms of, okay, we're just gonna call, these days periodically.
If every teacher did an hour a
So
day, and you could do it in a week or 2, I don't know. Get through the-
probably be more, just to say, these, dedicate days, otherwise you're scrambling schedules. But yeah, and I agree, and that's the other part of the rationale of if we considered, like the 28th and 29th, then the most impacted would be the K-3 because they wouldn't be coming to class that regularly. But it wouldn't be impacting as much for 4 and up because it would just be a change in, they wouldn't be going to class online like regular, but they'd be doing the conferences over that time. And they would have a task to complete during that time. As opposed to if we waited, until November, it would be kind of rough to say, okay, great, you're back in class for 2 days, and now we're gonna have you gone for 2 days so we can do conferences. So that would be my preference just because of that, is it's a lesser impact when we're in CDL mode. And if we end up needing to be in CDL mode longer, the state's expectation is saying you have some more frequent conferences. If we're CDL all year, the expectation is 4.
It'd be interesting to know the teacher's perspective as far as the timing, because like what Alan described of, let's just say an extra hour every, I don't know, the teacher's schedule ends at 3:45
Right.
or whatever it is. If they did, like, let's say the evenings is 2 5-hour blocks, and so it's 10 hours total, and if they'd rather take an hour for 10 days, because I think,
yeah.
because the trade-off for the teachers is, I believe, I heard that it was negotiated years ago that they get those 2 extra days of Thanksgiving week off for doing the conferences.
One day. It's trading the 2 evenings for Wednesday.
For Wednesday.
Prior to Thanksgiving.
Then what's the Monday, Tuesday, because we've had a full week off the last 2 years.
Yeah, that's just non-paid,
Non-paid,
yeah.
Non-paid, sorry.
Do the whole.
So, it's just a thought, but if they're gonna get the same trade, it might be kind of interesting to get input from the teachers, what they feel is more valuable.
And I think a little bit of that happens,
Oh, okay.
where, we
They kinda
identify the
trade.
days, and that's where they do the bulk of them.
Mm-hmm.
But I was just talking to some of the teachers I was talking to today were saying, yeah, but I do them throughout that week, to accommodate parents' needs. And so I think that's an easy area where we can say, you've got this block of time, get them done within this time frame. I don't care if it's 4 hours every evening, or if you're hitting it an hour for.
And that'd be easier to do once if it's all virtual, right, rather than the gym setup for.
Right, yeah, so I mean,
I was thinking it is another benefit
you
here.
schedule an appointment and they're there for.
Every kid's got, in theory, got a Chromebook now, and
Right.
mom and dad can log in.
I mean, it seems like over the years, both Azalea and the high school, sometimes there are teachers missing, usually because of sporting events, right? The coach is gone or
Right.
whatever, and so
So you-
usually that I reach out to that particular teacher via email and just check in. And it takes just 5 minutes, usually, unless that's a problem class, but
Right.
anyway. So, I mean, I can see that the virtual meetings would provide more flexibility both to the teachers and the parents.
And we have the 8 hours stipulated in the contract, so that wouldn't take any sort of union activity, just be defining when that was. doesn't say, you know, the 4 hours on this day, 4 hours on this, it just says a day
Yeah,
of
or
conferences.
something, yeah.
So we, you know, called out that day, in the calendar, so we could take board action and say, well, that's gonna be a different time. Now, adding conferences, because conferences and, you know, those are all called out specifically, that would require an MOU. I wouldn't anticipate that being a major controversial issue. It's just like, yeah, let's talk about it and work through that, so. So my hope and plan would be to, although we could get kind of close to that,
Yeah, next month or October or whatever.
yeah, because, I mean, we're, to be able to do the 28th and 29th
Of October.
of October. And I've just proposed that idea to the buildings as well, so, I want their feedback, on it in terms of saying, let's not wait until after the quarter where hopefully the kids will be back. So how might, I guess the question is, are we okay with the idea, and then worst case, if it needs to be a quick special meeting to say, we approve this change to the calendar? Which would also lead me to work through the MOU and things as well.
Yeah, I want to give my input that I think I'm okay with the idea of what you're exploring. I think it's a good idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm trying to think out, see, why not, and that sounds,
I think I agree.
yeah.
Yeah, like I say, the biggest impact would be K-3 wouldn't come to school like regular. I think Elena's intent would be they would come in for short in-person conferences, or if the parents couldn't, then it would be a teleconference, and then go from there. So, okay, I'll
Flexibility is the name of the game, so
work
yeah.
through the details of that, and then I'll follow up with you.
Again, just try to make life as easy as we can on staff and
Right.
everybody, so just kind of always try to think about it.
Okay. So that's all I've got for the regular meeting. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, well, let's go ahead and keep on going down the list here. Our action items tonight. First up, looking for a motion to approve the bus surplus property sale, right? So that's on there.
I move to approve the bus surplus property sale.
A second.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we got Jay there, thank you. Any questions or conversation around the surplus bus here? This is just, looks like a 2003 Bluebird that we're disposing of, sorry. Okay, seems straightforward. Start on the phone here, Catherine,
Aye.
Janice,
Aye.
Janelle,
Aye.
Jay.
Aye.
Aye as well. Okay, how about looking for a motion to approve the long-term leave request for Mr. Bruce Weiss.
And that's for this school year.
I'll make a motion to approve the long-term leave request for Bruce Lee.
I'll second that.
Okay, thanks, Catherine. Any questions or probably not all we can talk about?
Is this a common process? Sure it
Yes.
is.
So long-term leaves have to go to the board. This will need to be, and has already been in discussions as part of the MOU, because the contract stipulates long-term leave requests need to be submitted by April 1st. But it's like, with these unique circumstances, I think both parties are willing to say, we'll consider, not to say we can guarantee we'll approve, but we'll consider after that date. So that language is part of the draft MOU as well. So once that's finalized, then it can be, but it has to go to you for approval as well.
Right, given the current contract, but I think I heard your intent maybe is to change that April 1st date. Is that-
Temporarily for this year,
For this one.
and that's in the draft MOU language.
Okay.
And I imagine it's not very common to not approve these.
Correct. I mean, more often than not, they're approved. The challenge that we could conceivably run into is we don't have the capacity to say we can grant 10 of them.
Right,
So if you had a bunch of teachers saying, I just can't do it this year, I need to press pause, can you give me a leave, we could conceivably be at a point saying no. Because that means we're guaranteeing you a position, not necessarily the same one you left, but a position that you're qualified for the following year. So typically you don't hit that level where you have to have that concern, but,
That's what the approval
but
process
that's a
can.
possibility. So we just say we'll consider it, not saying we'll say yes to it.
Now, I guess my question, or maybe concern, or whatever, is, you know, I'll give you an example. Could I put in a long-term leave request because I want to, I mean, I can put anything I want on it.
Mhm.
I'm gonna go to school,
Right.
right?
And we have one of those.
But, you know, essentially, I can say I'm gonna go to school and take a year off and go travel and have my job guaranteed when I get back.
Yeah, basically. I have not had to deal with something where you say you're gonna do one thing and you do something else. Typically, it's pretty open-ended. I mean, I was granted actually a 2-year leave of absence to go teach overseas in England for 2 years. So that was atypical, but I was very appreciative of the board doing that. Came back, and I knew that when I came back, I knew I'd have a job, but I didn't know what the assignment would be, or what building or anything like that.
Right, I guess, do we have any, is there any expectation on our end, for instance, a school person, or somebody, you know, that is showing that they can't be here? You know, I would think that in a situation like this, obviously, there would be some doctor,
Release.
release forms that saying he's not, that he should be there for a year. You know, so I guess, you know, or the school situation, do we ask to see your enrollment each quarter at your, whatever school you're attending, to ensure that that's actually what's occurring, and we're not preventing somebody who may be highly qualified for that job long-term for having it? You know, are those things we can ask as part of a long-term leave request? Because that's a large request. I mean,
Right.
you know, and so you're asking us to hold your job for a year, hire somebody temporarily, and, you know, change up a lot of what's going on. You're gonna bring in somebody who probably isn't quite prepared, or, you know, whatever the case may be, or they may be fantastic.
Right.
So where is our ability to?
Honestly, I'm not sure in terms of what will be permitted to, right now, and it is called out in the contract, and it's general, of just saying, hey, you know, long-term leave of
That's
absence.
that ability.
It doesn't say that we can't ask for.
It doesn't say that we can't, so we just need to double check on what legally we can and can't request, you know, in terms of that. We don't want to inadvertently violate any laws. That's what I'm not 100% confident on, that I need to follow up.
Sure.
In terms of, can we redefine it? And I believe there would be, you know, the mechanism to say, and that would most appropriately look back to the contract and say, here's how we're gonna process it. I mean, some contracts have sabbaticals.
Sure.
And so that's clearly defined as, okay, you're gonna take this sabbatical for this purpose. And it's never really come up in HR is like, okay, what happens if you don't? What happens if I don't enroll for my grad program? And I do just take off, even though I said the reason for doing this was that. So right now, it is pretty open-ended, you're just saying, I'm requesting a leave of
I
absence.
suppose the counter would be, you know, from the union side, if that's a benefit afforded by the contract, then maybe the unit or the district shouldn't really have a say. Now we can
Well, but-
renegotiate the contract and say,
Right.
maybe we need.
And the board doesn't need to approve it. The board just needs to consider it. And so, like I said, there could be an instance where if we get another one or two, it's like, no, we just don't have the capacity to save that many jobs. So we're gonna have to say no, so you need to choose, are you gonna resign or are you going to
Sure.
continue, you know, working?
I would assume that when they return, let's just say next fall, there's 3 or 4 people that are out on one of these leave absences, they return for a job. I would assume that their job still fits the same seniority that when they left it. So if there was a reduction in force, it would fall into wherever they were. It doesn't.
The
mean-
hire date stays the same.
Right.
Yeah, and that's well-established contract law. Really, the only thing is, we're just pressing pause we don't pay them any benefits, anything like that. And if they continue the next, so like in this instance, would just be, the following year would be the next step. So you don't get a step credit for the year that you're gone or anything like that. So it literally just presses pause there. They don't, PERS-wise, that's not an employment year, so that delays that, your 30 years, that 1 year for there.
Yeah, I don't know, I guess I just have a really hard time,
Well, typically, it's not used that much, and so that, in most cases, if you got one or two, you can figure it out. Plus, fortunately, there are some contracts that stipulate I can come back to the same job, and so that would be bad. So that we have the flexibility to say, hey, great, I know you were in this building, but you're licensed here, so we're gonna assign you there.
Kind of bubble kindergartners or whatever this year,
Yeah.
something different.
Yeah, exactly, that we can assign them as we need, as long as they're endorsed to do that.
Yeah, this is a really hard thing for me to approve, because there's very little, I mean, it's you put one.
Not because it's the person, just.
No,
I
just
do.
because it's like, I don't know what I'm saving your position for 1 year. To me, it would probably need to be fairly substantial, right?
Other than my understanding, our current contract language, this is.
Yeah, that's all it says.
an
It
afforded
just says the
benefit.
reasons for the leave are stated. And you gotta be careful when you're starting to request medical information.
Yes.
from somebody.
But,
But you still don't have to honor a request for, you don't have to ask for more medical information, but you can say, I'm sorry.
The board can choose to say no.
And if somebody's gone for a medical reason, you can still ask for release, you don't have to ask anything about why they were gone, but you could make sure that they were fit to come back to work when they came back, so that you didn't have a situation that you were not wanting to be in. It's a hard one, I mean, I know what you're asking, because I think we had an equally hard time the last time this came up. It was a few months ago.
Yeah,
It's just-
and I mean, the smaller the district, the more challenge it becomes. Larger districts, like, you're gonna have a turnover, you're gonna have a spot, so
It's not a
it's
big
really
deal.
not a big deal. But the smaller you get, the less sure you are, and you do want to be cautious about that. And so I would certainly say, further considerations is, we would hesitate.
Is this only the second one, active one right now, or do we have another? I
No,
remember,
this is the second.
this is the second.
okay, well, I mean, I guess I just would, in the future, would like to know if there's expectations that we can place as well to ensure that this, that why we're saving your job is why you're
Is
saving.
actually what's happening.
Yeah,
Right.
And not that that would have to be brought back to us, but that would be your job to follow up and make sure that they
yeah.
did enroll in school or did not,
Right.
not that they.
So, and I will follow up in terms of, is there guidance of what's allowable that we can stipulate, and not an inadvertent? Because there is a separate for specific medical leave of absence, there's a separate process, and it doesn't need to go through this.
Mhm.
Exactly, that's why I'm wondering why we would be going through this
For medical reasons.
for a medical reason.
Well, for the guarantee the job, I think would be the benefit to it.
Well, you could do that through,
Except you couldn't get a whole year, typically speaking, in
well,
FMLA.
FMLA.
Not FMLA, but I mean, I've done it in the past with, like somebody with a liver transplant.
Sure.
And so they couldn't be at work, and so we said, okay, it just makes the most sense for you to leave, and then once
Yeah.
you're released, you can come back. But right, and like as Dee Dee said, it's like, there's also, with that set now, and it is established in the contract, we can't say, well, prove it in terms of that you want this for medical. So that would be more of a contractual, like in the spring, when the contract is up.
Yeah, wording going forward.
To say, let's look at how we can clarify this and clarify the expectations because of the potential for undue burden on the district. And say, here's the things, because I do believe you can say, here's what we'll consider. And so you can,
Define
we
specific.
negotiate that as saying, we'll consider if you want to go back to school. We'll consider these sort of things. And then by doing that, I believe then you can say, you can establish a process where if you don't, this is void.
Right. so.
I learned something there, I think I did.
I'll be learning more,
Yeah.
following up with that.
Question on the table, however, remains the approval of this specific leave request, so, let's go ahead and start on the phone. Catherine?
Aye.
Denise?
Aye.
Janelle?
Aye.
Jay? Aye as well. Okay, item C, approval of the organizational chart. It's included in our packet. Looking for a motion for that approval.
I move to approve the organizational chart.
Okay. Second by Janelle, thank you. Questions or concerns? Definition?
I just had one question. I didn't realize that, and this, no, at all, it has anything to do with Nathan, but really that he was also going to be doing HR stuff.
He's gonna be,
Interesting.
once Terry's back, he'll be doing the interim of Dee Dee's responsibility. And then we will post it in the spring, and probably just
Got it.
internally consider other folks. So, yeah. How
Okay.
much and how
Okay.
involved is just kind of still a little bit up in the air. His first priority will be taking over with the, the board responsibilities and the meetings and that sort of thing. And then as we're able to, have him roll into some of the HR procedures, because we're hoping to add some software, to manage the processes. And so that would be a great project for, again, is the setup of that software.
Okay, let's go to the phones again. Catherine?
Aye.
Denise?
Aye.
Janelle?
Aye.
Jay?
Aye.
Aye as well. Okay, D, approval of the first readings of the 15 listed board policies. Looking for a motion for that approval of the first reading.
I move to approve the first reading of board policy listed 1 through 15. Does that work?
Second.
Second, thanks, Janelle. Okay, any questions, discussion on the first readings here? All right. Catherine?
Aye.
Denise?
Aye.
Janelle?
Aye.
Jay?
Aye.
Aye for me as well. Okay, got through there. Board functions and comments. Again, like to have this on going forward, as any comments from board members about looking at future agenda items. Now's a good time to throw those at us. Keep the conversation going there. Anything specific you want to see going forward?
Alan, do we have, are we target, or looking forward, obviously September would have been hard to do, but bringing back celebrating this next month?
We've talked about that, yes. So I don't,
Fascinating.
we've talked in the past, we'd had an agenda item that we titled Celebrating Student Success, I believe is what Catherine's talking about. And it was generally a robotics team, for instance, one year won the national or the state and then placed in the nationals. So some sort of, kind of celebrating our students in recognition of a club or a group. And it's a little bit challenging the way we've done it in the past, just the way school is right now, because it would be something like, a group or an individual student that may have, won an honor or performed well or
Up
something.
on the screen.
Yeah, well, there's probably opportunities, but I guess traditionally it would be, I think of the robotics team that won a bunch of awards a couple years ago. So they came in and, talked about their robot and did some things. So all those, I guess I mean that those types of competitions aren't happening.
Okay.
What's that? Anyway, so, but yeah, that's something I think we'd like to try to consider getting back on the agenda, just that recognition of our students.
Yeah. I think I'd like to, I think it'd be a good challenge for us to find a way to continue that.
Maybe even for right now, it might be how some of those groups have kind of risen to the challenge to be able to figure out a way to meet and just
Yeah.
accomplish some of those, and even if you're not competing right now, I think it would be nice to hear some positive stories of how robotics is still somehow
Right.
doing a thing.
That's exactly the conversation we're having
Or
right
how,
now.
I heard, like, my daughter can't do orchestra this year because she's afternoon, and orchestra's only morning, which is crazy frustrating since she's done it since 6th grade. But supposedly there's an afternoon thing a couple days a week on football field that they're gonna do for kind of,
Yeah.
club orchestra.
Well, and that falls under the limited in person,
Right.
so,
So-
yeah, so we're able
So
to do that.
those kind of things would be interesting for us to kind of just hear positive stories, I guess, of how we're getting,
But we're
not getting
creatively
around, but
finding
being creative.
solutions.
Yeah.
Yes, no, that's great, we will have something for October. And what I'd
Yeah.
also.
And I think even something, you know, that we clearly we know that there are students who are rising to the task of, they may have competing obligations or things that are challenged, and they're rising above and beyond, and we don't celebrate them. You know, we don't have to, we can identify a group of them, you know, doesn't have to just start on one, but I'm sure there's many of them that are doing that. So just looking in different ways to continue to do that starting next month.
One thing that I noticed, very insignificant item on the agenda, but that I noticed, and it's probably from carryover from doing agendas online, but we skipped the pledge of allegiance.
We did.
You're right, good call out.
here, oh yeah, there it is.
I didn't even catch that, thank you. Yeah, let's get that back on the agenda.
Maybe we'll close the meeting with that.
Certainly, yeah.
Let's do it.
There's the flag over.
Any other thoughts on agenda items going forward? So the next one, district report topic discussion, and then the following district goal review, I think are a little bit related in that, you know, Jay, David, and I have talked at least a time or two about aligning, particularly the building reports, to contain similar information and valuable information that, you know, the board would like to hear from each individual principal. And I think it was Jay's idea to say, well, maybe those should align with our district goals, and that's kind of why I had Dee put that back in the packet here, just to, you know, start the discussion of what, you know, when we ask for building reports, and it's been a little bit pretty much haphazard as far as, you know, what each individual building includes. And I firmly believe that there's a lot of value in having that be consistent and be valuable information for us to look at, rather than just hearing about, you know, the latest field trip or whatever might have been included.
Yeah. Yeah, district goals don't need to be just a website story. You know,
Right, yeah, let's
so we can-
walk the walk a little bit, right?
And the other piece of that is that I don't know how everybody else feels, but, you know, I think our district goals should be fluid with what we're encountering as well. I mean, our goals may need to adjust, given our current circumstances, you know, and our metrics, you know, anyways. So that's another piece of conversation or topic that maybe we want to add to the next agenda as well, is, you know, looking at our board goals and seeing if there's any adjustments that we.
Well, these are kind of, I mean, it feels like these goals are very long-term goals, but maybe there are some short-term goals because of the circumstances we're in now that we would really like to accomplish.
Or what does that look short-term?
Right, what does it
Right.
look like?
Relationships, what does
These
that
same
look like
things,
in
how
our
do they look
current
differently?
context?
Yeah,
Has to look at the
student success,
context,
what does
yeah.
that look like short-term,
Right.
right now?
Right, because we said, you know, high levels of
So that we
engagement.
can measure them in some way, because that, I mean, that is, I don't know.
No,
It feels good to be able to measure in some way, and, I mean, and we got to hear some great examples from the principals today of how they've met some of those
Mhm.
successes. So if we could, if we could find some kind of measurement of that.
I think it'd be valuable if we could provide pretty specific, like, you know, in your district or your board report every month, we'd like to see these 3 things. You know, in addition to maybe some good stories or some challenges you're having, but what are these 3 consistent pieces of information?
And you want to talk about rotating?
Yeah, that's true. That idea did come up too, like, you know, rather than have all 3 present, maybe just on a rotating schedule, have, you know, 1 per month.
Kind of get more of that you get a higher quality,
More
because they
in
put a
depth.
lot into that quarterly versus monthly.
Yeah,
Not
I
for
did
the
like that.
quality, but that they would really focus on.
Well, and they have a little bit more time,
Mhm.
yeah, so you can dig in, because it was, that was a model they used in Hermiston, was very effective, because they were able to, obviously in more normal circumstances, you'd have staff come, so it wouldn't just be the principal, it'd be the staff, have that, here's what's going on, here's how we're approaching this.
Yeah, they deploy
challenge,
their folks.
and so, frequently it would be led by the teacher leadership, do the report there, and you had a larger block of time where they could really go more into that.
No, that's great. I mean, because we get a lot of the information that we're getting in our current ones.
We already have that information.
ADP, attendance, like a lot of the stuff that's reported on, it seems like each and every month.
Mhm.
So, I mean, that won't stop. So having some in-depth, deep conversations with each, I think it would be good for the public too.
Should we kind of start with these goals? I'm just trying to look how that could be. Requested.
Can we challenge David to maybe think of how these 3 long-term goals, how there might be some short-term goals within each of those that we could put on
Sure.
principles?
Well, how do you measure student success in an online world right now? How do we measure relationship building?
To me, that engagement, I would love to hear how Helena gets those 5 students she's had no contact with yet, right?
Right.
Or the ones that haven't checked in online yet, and how, at the high school level, how attendance online looks. And
Right.
are they actually keeping that, excitement that the kids have? And I think it's true, like, they haven't done anything for 7 months, and they're excited about,
How do we
Having some-
maintain that momentum?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and, school obviously is about learning, but it's also about the experience. So, that leads to a lot of the relationships and leads to a lot of the long-term connection. And how will that, how do we get little pieces of that back,
and it sounded like some of the examples they gave, the teachers are able to do that online, even though it didn't seem like that was possible. They're having fun
Mhm.
in some of those classes.
Right, that's.
And keeping that relationship so that kids do feel somehow engaged.
Yes.
Well, and I know that, part of our purposeful plan was, we're taking time in the year to focus on the relationships, to focus on the connections. Although last I know it was great, happened to be passing by, and I can't remember her name, PE teacher. And she said she's got the room cleared, she's doing calisthenics, and you look on there, and the kids are doing their warm-ups and stretches, and it was great, they were into it.
Right, today, actually, my 8th grade daughter, I kind of walked in her little classroom, what's going on? And she was doing jumping jacks or
Yeah.
something with her PE teacher, so yeah.
It's awesome.
Anyway, back to this topic. How do you guys think? I think we ought to maybe do the rotating schedule, and that's a pretty easy one to ask. And then, as far as specifics, I think maybe these these board goals, in some way to kind of
Right.
It'll be interesting to
demonstrate
see
those,
how they define student success now and how they define the
Well, that's
relationship.
interesting.
Yeah,
Just give
well,
them-
that was my thought when Janelle said, hey, we're gonna test
Put it
this
on
out.
there.
That's what I'm gonna do, is I wanna get the feedback from the staff and say,
Right.
let's talk about this,
I'm just here thinking there's gonna be a lot of different answers if you ask.
Yeah, so that was my plan anyway, was to say, okay, I'll come back to, with that, in terms of, here's what we came up with, how we're gonna look at these.
And maybe that's not a bad follow-up question. We could say, well, next month, put Elena back on the spot, and say, well, last, we heard about, you had 5 kids,
Right.
how did that relationship go?
Right,
Maybe that's
were
part
you
of
able to
her-
connect, what did you do, and, but also I think just getting specific about this is what it looks like. And those are the conversations that are going on, right now.
Yeah, we'll find KPIs, I think, along the road that we can
Yeah, those
start
will-
measuring.
Start to form.
Mhm.
You sit here and dream up something that probably won't stick.
Right.
And so,
Yeah.
yeah, especially with online learning, if that goes on for any amount of time, things will jump out probably the
Yeah.
minutes logged in or I don't know what it might come out of it.
great, thank you.
I appreciate that. Okay, reminder, next regular school board meeting, the 18th of October, 5:30. Probably a setup similar to this. We'll probably think about public. I'm not sure how we want to
So,
do that yet.
what we want to work towards, it was just, we didn't have enough time to process through, is being able to potentially have, do the parallel Google Meet, and put that up on the screen,
Mhm.
so that like, the board members aren't able to attend here, then they're showing up there, and also live stream it. And then another conversation would be, okay, do we want to say, we'll take comments live, so that you can unmute and say, okay, go ahead and read your
I
statement.
think that'd be a good thing to work towards.
Yeah, so I think we'll work through those technical challenges. All we, right now is like, okay, let's get the mic set up, make sure that works, and get it captured on video, and we'll progress from there, so that, I think at a minimum next time to be able to also live stream, and then.
Maybe
Does it
live
have the
there.
capability to do, the sound and technology like in either the auditorium or a cafeteria or something? Is this kind of hard? Because it seems like you have way more room for public if you were in one of those,
Yeah.
like we could be up on a stage with these tables in the auditorium and you could have chairs separated by 6 feet
Right.
for your audience, but really hard in here to figure out where you're gonna put very many chairs.
Well, then if you're doing that, then you wouldn't need to necessarily live.
Do the live stream.
Right,
do it
right, you
full.
have enough. So I mean, we don't have a room as big as the gym, for example, at the city, but we have an EOC that we use for meetings that we think we're gonna have a bigger
Right.
crowd.
I've actually done that.
Anyway, but
But yeah, you're at
You
the
guys have a lot of
auditorium,
big
at the
buildings.
high school, mic, that would
it seems like
accommodate our
there's good
typical
sound,
crowd.
right? That's where we do concerts.
Well, and then that is just, you would just be, we've got these, and so it would just be making sure that.
But, that would, I believe, probably accommodate our typical crowd.
So
spaced out
is
well.
that the desire then to try and work towards for next month, being able to have public in attendance?
I think so. I mean, I think that's.
I think that
kind of where I'd like to
direction.
be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we should move in that direction, but I like the idea of still providing it live, because there's just some people that still can't attend, so make that available.
Yes,
Okay,
Nicole.
so we'll,
Not off
we'll
the
keep
tech,
troubleshooting with the live streaming as well, because, I mean, we've got the pieces, it's
Mhm.
just, okay, how well is that gonna work, and figuring out the camera placement and that sort of thing. Hopefully, this will be reasonably good quality, I guarantee it.
Jesus, on here has October 18th, which is a Sunday, so I'm pretty sure I think
Oh,
it's
did
the
I?
21st.
I just read the paper. Did I get that wrong?
Unless I'm
It'd be the 21st, I think you're right.
October 21st.
Okay, so amend your calendars to be the October 21st, third Wednesday.
I got it. Can I make a comment real quick?
Yes.
I just want to formally thank Miss Pruden. She's been doing some really good work with kids off-site. And so I had my first intern,
Okay.
and it went really, really good.
Is this the city or the pub?
The pub. And, she just called up out of the blue and said, hey, I have a child who, student who would like to learn more about this, and can they do it? I was like, yeah, of course. So I'm glad to see, that's pretty fantastic. And so, the relationship might not happen sometimes, in a Zoom meeting, but it could happen with the community. It could happen with whatever, so.
Right.
It's gonna get, anyways, I just wanted to say formally thank her.
Great, thank you.
That's great.
We will make sure she gets the message. Just in case she doesn't happen to dial in.
At the end of this 2-hour thing. Okay, we're gonna adjourn the regular session here in a moment, but first, I think I like Jay's suggestion, let's do a belated pledge of allegiance. Our corner here. So I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America,
The United States of America.
republic for which it stands,
and
one
which
nation, under God,
one nation,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Free and justice for all.
That was
just,
Yeah.
really
That's
delayed.
right. That's right. Okay, so we're going to adjourn the public session of the meeting, so hang on, looks like we've got an executive session update in just a moment here. I'll